Hi guys, today we are going to find out what if Chernobyl had destroyed Europe. You're standing in the control room of Reactor 4 at 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986. The safety test has gone horribly wrong, and you feel the building shake violently beneath your feet. Instead of the explosion that history remembers, something far worse happens. A complete meltdown that defies all physics. The reactor core doesn't just explode, it creates a sustained nuclear reaction that burns like a second sun. You watch in horror as temperatures reach levels that shouldn't be possible, melting through containment like butter. The graphite moderator ignites in a chain reaction that spreads to neighboring reactors within hours. You probably won't survive this, but neither will most of the continent you call home. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now sit back and let's dive into today's alternate journey together. The initial blast sends a column of radioactive fire 2 miles into the atmosphere. You realize this isn't just an accident. It's the beginning of Europe's end. Within 6 hours, you see the radioactive cloud racing westward at 30 miles per hour. Unlike the historical accident, this supercharged plume carries 10 times the deadly payload across European skies. You watch satellite feeds, showing the invisible death creeping over Poland's eastern border by dawn. Geiger counters in Warsaw start clicking frantically as radiation levels spike beyond all safety measurements. By noon, the cloud has crossed into East Germany, where panicked officials finally sound evacuation alarms. You realize governments are hopelessly behind the spreading contamination, still debating while citizens die. The radioactive plume splits into 3 deadly fingers, one heading towards Scandinavia, another towards Central Europe. The third and largest stream barrels straight toward the heart of Western Europe's population centers. You see emergency broadcasts interrupting regular programming across the continent as the truth becomes undeniable. Wind patterns that historically dispersed Chernobyl's fallout now work against humanity, concentrating the radiation instead. By evening, background radiation in Berlin reaches levels that make the city uninhabitable for decades. You witness the moment when European meteorologists realize this isn't just an accident, it's an extinction event. Radiation detectors in France begin registering dangerous levels as the cloud approaches the Rhine Valley. The deadly plume moves faster than evacuation orders, faster than escape routes, faster than hope itself. You join the chaos as 20 million people attempt to flee westward simultaneously across crumbling infrastructure. Highways become parking lots of desperation as families abandon cars when fuel runs out. You witness children separated from parents in the stampede, their cries lost in the roar of panicking crowds. Train stations overflow with desperate masses fighting for space on the last departing locomotives heading anywhere west. You see elderly people collapsing from exhaustion, unable to keep pace with the frantic exodus. Emergency services completely break down as first responders flee alongside the civilians they're supposed to help. You watch looters strip abandoned stores bare while radiation detectors scream warnings throughout empty city centers. Fuel shortages strand millions of vehicles on highways that become graveyards of rusted metal and human bones. You navigate through checkpoint chaos as border guards abandon their posts rather than face the approaching death cloud. Hospitals empty as medical staff join the exodus, leaving patients to die alone in contaminated wards. You witness the breakdown of all social order as survival instinct overrides every civilized behavior humanity learned. Communication networks collapse under the weight of simultaneous panic calls from across the continent. You realize that in just 48 hours, organized European civilization has completely ceased to exist. The lucky ones escape. The unlucky ones become part of the greatest human tragedy in recorded history. You watch from a distance as the German Chancellor's helicopter lifts off from a contaminated Berlin, abandoning the capital forever. NATO headquarters in Brussels goes silent as military leaders evacuate to temporary bunkers in uncontaminated territories. You see the French president's motorcade racing toward the Spanish border while Paris radiation levels climb exponentially. Emergency government protocols that assumed localized disasters prove utterly useless against continent-wide contamination spreading hourly. You witness the collapse of the European Economic Community as member nations close borders and suspend all cooperation. Banking systems crash when financial centers in Frankfurt and London become uninhabitable within 72 hours. You observe military units deserting their posts as soldiers choose family survival over national duty. Communication between European capitals ceases entirely as diplomatic staff join the westward refugee streams. You watch democracy die in real time as elected officials flee faster than the citizens who trusted them. Emergency powers activate automatically, but there's nobody left in government buildings to exercise them. You see regional warlords emerging from the chaos as local strongmen fill the power vacuum with violence. International law becomes meaningless when the nations that created those laws no longer exist functionally. You realize that within 1 week, 1,000 years of European political evolution has simply vanished. The continent that gave birth to modern democracy becomes a lawless wasteland ruled by radiation and fear. You stand at the edge of what scientists now call the European exclusion zone, stretching from Kiev to the Rhine. Radiation levels here make Fukushima look like a gentle spring breeze compared to this nuclear hurricane. You observe through protective equipment as entire forests die within days, their leaves turning brown and falling like snow. Wildlife flees in massive migrations, but most animals don't make it past the zone's invisible deadly boundaries. You document how rivers become radioactive highways, carrying contamination downstream to previously safe regions. The soil itself becomes poisoned for centuries, making agriculture impossible across Europe's former breadbasket regions. You watch satellites capture images of the spreading death zone, a growing black stain on Earth's surface. Even wearing full radiation suits, your Geiger counter screams warnings as background radiation exceeds survivable limits. You witness nature's immediate response. Birds falling from the sky, fish floating belly up in contaminated waterways. Temperature anomalies appear where the reactor core continues burning, creating localized weather patterns of radioactive rain. You observe how the contamination follows underground water tables, poisoning aquifers hundreds of miles away. Vegetation within 50 miles of the disaster site begins mutating into unrecognizable, twisted forms. You document how even the wind patterns change around the zone, as if nature itself rejects this poisoned landscape. The dead zone expands daily, consuming everything in its path like a slow-motion atomic bomb. You watch global stock markets plummet as Europe's economic engine disappears overnight into radioactive silence. The London Stock Exchange's final trading session ends with a complete collapse before evacuating to temporary facilities. You witness manufacturing supply chains snap like rubber bands as European factories shut down permanently. Global shipping routes that depended on European ports suddenly redirect to North American and Asian alternatives. You observe how German automotive giants, BMW, Mercedes, Volkswagen, cease production as their homeland becomes uninhabitable. Agricultural exports from France's fertile regions halt immediately, triggering worldwide food price spikes and shortages. You see the euro currency collapse within hours as central banking infrastructure evacuates or simply abandons operations. Insurance companies worldwide declare bankruptcy as European property claims exceed the global economy's entire annual output. You track how petroleum refineries across the continent shut down, creating immediate fuel shortages from Asia to America. Pharmaceutical manufacturing centered in Switzerland and Germany stops completely, triggering global medicine shortages within weeks. You witness panic buying sweeping across uncontaminated continents as people hoard European-manufactured goods before supplies vanish. Technology companies scramble to relocate operations as their European research facilities become permanently inaccessible radioactive tombs. You observe unemployment rates in non-European nations skyrocket as global trade networks collapse like dominoes. The world economy shrinks by 30% overnight, plunging humanity into its deepest recession since civilization began. You find yourself among 50 million European refugees streaming into Spain, Portugal, and North Africa within the first month. Refugee camps stretch beyond every horizon as temporary shelters become permanent cities of the displaced and desperate. You witness overcrowding so severe that diseases spread faster through camps than radiation spread through Europe. Water shortages plague refugee settlements as infrastructure buckles under populations it was never designed to support. You see families torn apart as different members flee to different continents, scattered like seeds in a nuclear wind. Language barriers create chaos in camps where Polish, German, French, and Italian speakers compete for dwindling resources. You observe how receiving nations quickly close their borders as the refugee tsunami threatens their own stability. Australia implements emergency quotas, accepting only skilled professionals while turning away millions of ordinary European families. You watch America struggle to process the largest immigration wave in human history through completely overwhelmed systems. Canada opens its doors wider, but even their vast territory cannot absorb the endless streams of radiation refugees. You witness the emergence of refugee ghettos in major cities worldwide as integration becomes impossible. Crime rates explode in host nations as desperate people resort to survival by any means necessary. You see children growing up stateless, belonging nowhere, carrying European memories in non-European lands. The very concept of European identity begins dissolving as survivors adapt to new homelands and foreign cultures. You observe America emerging as the sole Western superpower as Europe's political influence vanishes from global affairs. The Soviet Union suddenly finds itself without its primary ideological rival, fundamentally altering the Cold War's entire dynamic. You watch China accelerate its economic development to fill manufacturing gaps left by Europe's industrial disappearance. Japan becomes the undisputed leader of advanced technology development without German and Swiss competition constraining innovation. You witness the United Nations relocating from New York to Singapore as global power centers shift dramatically eastward. NATO dissolves completely since most member nations no longer exist as functioning political entities. You see the Warsaw Pact transform into a Russian-dominated alliance stretching unopposed from Moscow to the Atlantic. Middle Eastern nations gain unprecedented influence as European colonial legacies and interference finally end permanently. You observe Africa beginning rapid decolonization without European powers maintaining their historical economic strangleholds. Australia and New Zealand become regional powers by default, absorbing European refugees while expanding their global influence. You witness Latin American nations forming stronger alliances without European economic competition, undermining their regional cooperation. The global balance of power shifts so dramatically that maps require complete redrawing within a single decade. You realize that European civilization's millennium of global dominance ends not through war, but through atomic fire. World history's next chapter begins with Asia and America writing the rules while Europe becomes a cautionary tale. You witness desperate scientists worldwide collaborating on breakthrough radiation cleanup technologies that seemed impossible just months earlier. American and Japanese researchers develop revolutionary robotic systems capable of operating in lethal radiation environments for extended periods. You observe the first successful tests of bioengineered bacteria designed to consume radioactive isotopes and neutralize contaminated soil. Soviet scientists, freed from Cold War secrecy, share crucial nuclear data that accelerates international decontamination research. You see massive funding pour into fusion research as the world desperately seeks clean energy alternatives to nuclear fission. Breakthrough materials. Science emerges from the crisis, creating radiation-resistant alloys and protective fabrics previously thought impossible. You witness the development of atmospheric scrubbing systems that can filter radioactive particles from contaminated air masses. International space agencies fast-track orbital solar collection systems to replace Europe's lost energy production capacity permanently. You observe how the disaster sparks unprecedented global scientific cooperation, breaking down nationalistic research barriers completely. Gene therapy advances accelerate by decades as researchers race to treat radiation-induced mutations in refugee populations. You see the first successful large-scale soil remediation projects beginning in Europe's less contaminated peripheral regions. Artificial intelligence development surges as automated systems become essential for monitoring and managing radioactive zones safely. You witness how necessity drives innovation faster than peacetime research ever could, transforming multiple scientific fields. The tragedy becomes humanity's catalyst for technological advancement that reshapes civilization's relationship with atomic energy forever. You find yourself 40 years later, standing in what was once downtown Paris, now a thriving research city. The radiation has finally diminished to safe levels through decades of scientific breakthrough and natural decay processes. You walk through streets where international teams have rebuilt European cities as testaments to human resilience and innovation. Former refugee children, now adults, return to reclaim ancestral lands their parents thought lost forever to atomic fire. You observe how the disaster fundamentally changed humanity's relationship with nuclear technology, making fusion power universally adopted. The dead zone has become a massive nature preserve where wildlife flourishes in the absence of human interference. You see memorials honoring the 50 million who died, their sacrifice remembered as the price of mankind's nuclear awakening. European cultures survive in diaspora communities worldwide, creating a global network of scattered but connected heritage. You witness how the tragedy sparked the greatest period of international cooperation in human history. New cities built on former contaminated land showcase revolutionary architecture designed specifically for post-nuclear environments. You observe how this alternate timeline produced technologies that made the original timeline's environmental problems seem trivial. The disaster that destroyed a continent ultimately saved the planet by forcing humanity to abandon dangerous nuclear fission. You reflect on how sometimes civilization's greatest catastrophes become the catalyst for its most profound evolutionary leaps. Standing in this reborn Europe, you understand that from humanity's darkest hour emerged its brightest technological dawn. So here you are, contemplating one of history's most terrifying alternate possibilities, where a single night rewrote the entire trajectory of human civilization. In this timeline, Europe's thousand-year dominance ended not through gradual decline, but in a radioactive flash that changed everything forever. The continent that gave us Shakespeare, Mozart, and Einstein became humanity's greatest cautionary tale about the power we dare to harness. Yet from this unimaginable tragedy emerged unexpected gifts: technological breakthroughs, global cooperation, and ultimately a cleaner, safer world. The refugees who lost everything became the seeds of a new kind of international community, one without borders drawn by ancient hatreds. Sometimes civilization's greatest leaps forward require its most devastating stumbles backward, forcing us to rebuild better than before. This alternate Europe teaches us that even our darkest timelines can illuminate paths toward unexpected redemption and progress. The question isn't whether we could survive such a catastrophe, but whether we could emerge from it more united than divided. As you return to our timeline, remember that the choices we make about nuclear technology today echo across all possible futures. What other pivotal moments in history might have unfolded differently with just one small change, one different decision, one altered variable?